In this video, I'm gonna show you the best way to braze copper lines, and I'm gonna show you right now. So as you can see, we started out with safety in mind. I've got on my safety glasses and I've got on gloves. Different people wear different things for safety, but remember, always think safety before you start any job. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut this right in the middle. Then I'm gonna clean it, and yes, I'm gonna ream it on camera this time, that way y'all get to see me. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the cutters, and I don't have this locked down. I've got a nice little jig built here, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut this. And if y'all can't tell, I built a little stand here because when you seal floss or silver solder or braze or whatever you wanna call it, it gets a lot hotter than normal. So what I like to do is have some way to support it. I'm gonna take this out, and as you know, when you cut copper, you get a bend on the inside. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my reamer and make sure that I get a good bevel there. Now there's different ways to clean your copper. You can use sandcloth, or you can actually use a Scotch-Brite pad. It depends on what you're working on maybe, or what condition you're in. A lot of times if I'm under a house, I will probably go for the abrasive cloth first, but I also come back in with my pad just to make sure that I've got it good and clean. I'm bad about over cleaning stuff because I want to make sure that the solder has nothing but good, pure, clean copper to grab a hold of. So I'm really big about making sure everything is clean. Now, if you're working on a medical gas system, Scotch-Brite pads may be the only thing that you can use. So you want to make sure that you get it good and clean. Both these ends look really good. They've been reamed on the inside and cleaned on the outside. And as you see, we've got good clean surfaces there to work with. So now what I'm gonna do the same thing with my fitting. Now, if this was med gas, your fitting should already be cleaned and bagged. You probably don't have to do this, only on copper that may have got left out, oxidized on the outside or something like that. Once you get it all cleaned up, you want to make sure that you get your fitting to go all the way full depth. The pipe goes all the way into the stop. That way you know everything's penetrated in as far as it needs to go. I'm going to snug this up just a little bit to keep it from moving around. I built this little stand here because when this gets hot, I don't want it to lose shape. I don't want it to start to drop just a little bit. So I've got this built just to support it right where I want it. In the other video, y'all saw we used the Prestolite. We used the small feather flame tip to heat up the copper in order to solder it. We also fluxed it before we put it together. Now you don't do that on seal floss. The only thing that you might need a flux for is if you're going to brass, if you're going to a dissimilar metal. What we're looking at here is copper to copper. So we're gonna go to a turbo tip. This is a 1-inch line, so this is probably too small of a tip for it. There is a chart, and I know that we've showed it to you in another video, so we'll show it to you again, but the chart will show you what size tip to use for what size lines. The other thing that I want to show you here before we get started, make sure you look at your silver solder before you really get going. I've had this happen to me before, but this is some older silver solder and it started to oxidize. If you use this while you are soldering, what happens is this oxidation will stay in the solder. and it will actually cause it to leak because that's impurities that are in there that are actually going to allow the water to leak through it. So it's not a good thing to have. If you look at new seal floss, it's actually bright and shiny, looks nice and clean. I mean, this thing looks like a brand new piece of silver. That's what you want it to look like before you get started. If you end up with any impurities in your solder joint, it can actually cause it to leak, and that's going to make you have to start over and do everything again. There's a couple of different rules that I always go by. I used to do a lot of silver soldering because I worked for a fire protection company, and we were running copper mains. Not just mains, but the branches, the drops, almost everything. And there was very little penetration. What we would do is we would use a T-drill to drill a hole into the pipe, and it would actually pull out a fitting that you could stick the pipe into. So literally, your metal to metal surface was only about 1/8 of an inch. So what we did when we soldered there was literally you put a cap on it and you built a really good cap. That's how I started out learning to solder. Well, then when I got into met gas, they want full penetration. They want that solder to pull all the way down into the center of your fitting. Now the funny thing about it is a fire protection system goes at about 300 PSI. These, for a water line, not anywhere near that much. I'm going to go ahead and show you full penetration. I'm also going to show you how I put a cap on it because I still believe in that. When I start a silver solder joint or a seal floss joint, I like to heat my pipe because I want my pipe to expand to fill up the fitting. Then I move my flame over to my fitting to make sure that I have good heat in there. Solder goes to where the fire is. Solder goes to where the heat is. So I like to move my torch around, and when I'm putting solder in, I like to make sure it gets pushed in really good, especially if I'm going for full penetration. And when I'm doing that, I want to make sure too that I keep my heat right in the middle of the fitting. All right, here we go. One thing here, stay around to the end. I've got a trick that I do that my guys think is fantastic. And really what it is, it's how not to waste any silver solder at all, because this stuff is expensive. Now, one thing that I do, I want to make sure that I keep this hot enough that I can see the silver solder melting on both sides. It's blending into the copper. As you can see, I built a cap on both sides. And the reason that I do that is, like I said, that's the way that I learned whenever I was doing fire protection systems. So this cap is nice and big. I cannot see the edge of the fitting at all. And I like that because I know that not only have I filled it, but I've also come back and capped it too. One thing that I don't do is I don't use water to cool down these joints. I will actually wait and let this joint cool down by itself. The reason being, I really think that when the joint is this hot and you wet it down with a rag or even just water, a spray bottle or anything, you can cause it to crack. And I don't want to do anything to mess up this joint. Where would you use silver solder? Like I said, on med gas systems, yes. Where we use them more than anything at all is if we tunnel up under a house to fix a slab leak. The reason being, they don't want you soldering under the slab. So what we do, if we have to make a copper repair, because you normally don't put fittings under a slab. But if we have to make a copper repair under a slab, or maybe even if we're making a repair where we're tying a PEX or an Uponor line to it, we will actually braze an adapter on there. That way we can hook that pipe up to it. This is one of the neatest things to learn because this is where you can really get in and make some good repairs. So I'm gonna let this joint cool down for just a second and then we'll come back and show you what it looks like. So we've made a good silver solder joint here and we didn't even burn down the house. Isn't that kind of neat? Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna clean it up a little bit because I want you to really be able to see it. Now, I'm gonna tell you, this is not a bad looking joint. I've got a couple of titties on it. But if you look, it actually laid down in there real smooth. It looks like it melted in and blended good. Like I said, I got one right there that's a little big. I got one right there that's a little big. But other than that, I'm telling you, I like this. I think this joint would be good. I don't think it'd ever leak. And that's how you do it. Guys, remember the things that I talked about. Make sure that your silver solder is good and clean. There's no oxidation on it, if there's anything like that. Make sure you clean your joint. I can't tell you how big that is. And I've seen some people that just really don't. And I don't know if it's they don't worry about it. I don't know what it is, but I like to clean my joints before and after. After, lets me get a good look at them to see, are there any holes, anything like that? And like the dimple right there in the coupling, every now and then, whenever I used bad solder before, you could see a hole there. And you don't always realize that the solder has oxidation on it. So take a minute and look at it, because what you don't want to have a leak after you've gone through and fixed everything. And I'm telling you, if your solder's not good, if it's not clean, if your coupling isn't getting hot enough, there's a lot of different reasons that can make you have problems. If you sil floss or you braze or you silver solder or whatever it is you call it, let me know. Is there anything that you do different? Because look, we're all taught different ways, and I completely get that. I'm not the only way to do it. I just do it the way that I was taught. And if you like this video, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think or what you do different. Anyway, this is how I do it. I'm Roger Wakefield, Lead AP, the Expert Plumber. I'll see you in the next video if you don't get flushed.